You cannot give a right to a fetus that no other human has, the right to use someone else's body without express and ongoing consent. How you feel about abortion and whether you would have one is really irrelevant to this discussion. You can't make people use their body to keep someone else alive. This is not ethical, and it's a breach of bodily integrity and autonomy. First off, thank you for clicking on this video. I know this is a very difficult topic for a lot of people to discuss. It comes with a lot of emotion and visceral reaction for a lot of people, and that's okay. But I think it is evident now more than ever, we have to have some level-headed and real conversations around what it means to take away someone's access to termination and what the outcomes of that can be. I'm Mama Dr. Jones, a board-certified OBGYN and Mom to 4, and today we're talking about abortion. More specifically, we're talking about Roe v. Wade, the recent draft opinion from the Supreme Court of the United States, and what it might look like if that is implemented in the future. Along with an overview of the facts, I'll be giving you some evidence-based data, as well as my opinion as a medical doctor who takes care of people who are pregnant. At the end of the video, I'll be answering some of your questions that you left in the community tab. Please have a conversation in the comments. I encourage you to discuss and leave your opinion. Name-calling and hatefulness will not be tolerated. We have to have a real and level-headed conversation about this while recognizing that not everybody's life views and experiences are going to align with our own. What is Roe v. Wade and why does it even matter? Roe v. Wade is a lawsuit which was filed in Texas by a woman named Norma McCorvey in 1969. She was pregnant at the time and wanted an abortion but couldn't have one because it was illegal in Texas at that time, except for in situations where there was a threat to the life of the person who was pregnant. She filed that lawsuit under the name Jane Roe as a pseudonym, and that's where we get the Roe in Roe v. Wade. The Wade comes from Harry Wade, who was a district attorney on the opposing side of the suit, representing the state of Texas. So Roe's side was basically arguing that the law Texas was enforcing at the time was unconstitutional based on the 9th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And that basically says that people retain rights to things which are not specifically addressed in the Constitution or Bill of Rights, or that these documents aren't to be used as the exclusive rights of the people. And the district courts in Texas where Roe filed this agreed, so they won that case. However, the state of Texas never placed an injunction on this law, meaning it wasn't enforced that it changed. And Roe said, you know, we brought this case, I won the case, and nothing changed. Everybody's laws are still the same. Nobody has access to abortion in Texas. So after that, they went on to file this case with the Supreme Court of the United States based on the premise that the lack of injunction from the Texas government negated the whole ruling because nothing functionally changed in the state of Texas. So in 1973, Roe v. Wade was heard by the Supreme Court of the United States, and they arrived at a large majority ruling that an individual's right to privacy outlined in the 14th Amendment supersedes a state's right to ban pregnancy termination in their state. So this ruling federally protected somebody's right to choose termination of pregnancy in the first trimester, meaning states could not put restrictions or bans on first trimester abortion. They said in it that in the second trimester, you could make some restrictions, but no bans would be accepted. And then in the third trimester, they generally said you can ban abortion as a state if you would like to do that. So it wasn't just an overall protection of all abortion rights, but it was a first trimester access to abortion federal protection for the United States. So it did lay out a little bit of legal framework for what the states could expect to have as bans or restrictions depending on the stage of pregnancy. So the next kind of landmark case for discussion of abortion rights in the United States is Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And this was filed in 1992 on behalf of Planned Parenthood. And they, instead of arguing the right to privacy, were more saying there are a lot of states who are putting in unnecessary roadblocks to make access to abortion really difficult in their state, and we don't think that this is constitutional either. So the Supreme Court heard their case and ruled with a majority opinion that putting undue burden on someone who is seeking abortion in an attempt to keep them from accessing it was unconstitutional. So I think it's an important point to note here that public opinion has never shown a majority of people to be in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade. Even the most recent polls that we have show that most people don't think Roe v. Wade should be overturned. I'm obviously not a legal person, and I'm also trying to keep this simple so that we can get to the medical point. So we're going to jump forward to 2021 here, where the Supreme Court was tasked with hearing two big abortion cases. The first one was the Texas law, which I have talked about at length in another video, and the other one was a Mississippi attempt to ban abortion after 15 weeks. So they heard that at the end of 2021. So what does the draft opinion say? Well, it says a lot, honestly. It's like 98 pages long, and I'll link it below if you want to check out the entire thing. But Alito, the Supreme Court justice who penned the piece, basically centralizes on this theme that the right to abortion is never explicitly stated in the Constitution, and thus the states may restrict it as they see fit. It includes a lot of really questionable language and discussion that is lacking context, specifically talking about the demand for adoption being high in the US, which I find to be a little bit concerning to center a discussion of an individual's rights around basically forcing you to carry a pregnancy to term and then give your baby to somebody. Adoption is an alternative to parenting, but right now we're talking about alternative to pregnancy. So in my opinion, that's not important in this discussion. You can't force somebody to have a baby for you because you want it. That's not ethical. And then it also goes into some discussion about the fact that Black people in America utilize abortion services at higher rates. And I find this really concerning because they say it in such a way that it implies abortion is being used to get rid of Black people, but they specifically leave out the fact that this is a population who historically and systemically has had less access to sex education, to contraception, and to overall health care. The National Black Women's Reproductive Justice has a really good outline of how barriers to reproductive health care and education specifically and disproportionately affect people who are Black. So I will link that below if you're interested in looking at it as well. But of note, that's not discussed at all in this piece. It is presented in a very biased manner, not in a way that you would ever expect a Supreme Court opinion to be expressed. They're supposed to be neutral and discussing legality, not making calls on how the service is being used that lack a lot of context that it's quite important for that discussion. He also makes some points regarding the fact that the Constitution does not specifically lay out a right to privacy, which is a bit of a concerning statement in how broadly that could also be interpreted for future rulings or what we could expect this makeup of the Supreme Court to do next. So how is overturning Roe v. Wade different from the Texas abortion ban that I talked about in the other video, which I will link in the iCard and you can watch after this? The basis is that the Texas ruling that came into play in about October of last year was a civil courts dispute, or you could bring a lawsuit civilly. They did that because they couldn't make government bans on abortion. The idea was basically to circumvent Roe v. Wade with the original 6-week Texas abortion ban, because it didn't, like, government didn't ban abortion in Texas. It was just that if you were associated with an abortion, you could be sued by another individual of the community or anywhere else in the US. It also provided distinct protection for the person who was having the abortion. So the person having the termination could not be the one that was sued, just anybody adjacent to it. This is different than overturning federal protections, because once that goes away, you can essentially count on the states to do whatever they want. There are no restrictions, and it can be criminalized. These states are not limited to just restricting access or saying you can't have an abortion. They also can criminalize it, anywhere from misdemeanor to felony to murder charges. You don't know what kind of thing that they will propose. So it's very different than the Texas ban that started in October, and even that was really concerning, and I talk about a lot of that in the other video, but this is on a whole different level. So what happens now? Well, immediately upon signing this in, 26 states will either completely ban or very stringently restrict abortion access in their state. This does not just mean that you can't have a D&E, which is the procedure that a lot of the anti-choice people like to parade around with horrible pictures of. It means all termination. So you can't have a medication that you take at 6 weeks that causes you to have a termination. You can't have a suction abortion. You can't have a D&E, but you also can't have an induction that is intentionally resulting in delivery of a fetus that can't survive, or a C-section, which is intentionally meant to deliver a fetus that can't survive. These are all included in abortion. And I know that they like to make you think that it's only D&E that they're against, but that's not the case. This covers everything because all of those things under the umbrella of this law are abortion. So what's the trickle down? Well, we can expect that abortion will not go away, right? We know that. Even if 26 states ban or make it very difficult to have an abortion, people are still going to have abortions. They will just be unsafe. We know this based on historical fact, but we also know this based on the fact that preventing people from having an abortion does not do a damn thing for the cause of abortion, which is unintended pregnancy, for the most part. Not always, but sometimes. So I think that that's a really important point, that abortions are still going to happen whether a state bans them or not. It's just how risky will that be to the person who is having it. We also know what happens when people are denied abortion, and we have some data on this that compares people denied abortion to people who had access and received abortion when they requested it. People who are denied abortion are more likely to experience socioeconomic hardships than their counterparts who sought abortion and were provided with that. More likely to have food insecurity, they are more likely to experience bankruptcy, they are more likely to be evicted, and these hardships persist for years after the point of that denial. People who are denied abortion are also more likely to stay in contact with a violent partner. Intimate partner violence is higher for people who were denied abortion than their counterparts who received abortion when they sought that. They are more likely to be raising a child alone without the help of a partner or family in 5 years. 60% of people who seek out a termination are already parents. Their existing children's financial security, well-being, and development is negatively impacted if their parent is denied termination when they seek that. Meaning, there are poorer outcomes for the children in that family if a parent has sought out an abortion and been denied it. I will link all of these references down below if you'd like to review it. I'll also link a really good overview article that goes through some of these points, but I think these are really important data points because it kind of shows us that maybe people who are seeking termination are doing so because it's the best thing for them. We're also aware that pregnancy is not a health neutral event, right? My friend Marta Perez, who has a YouTube channel, I'll link it below, just wrote an article about this. Additionally, I just want to make the point that every single thing that you're at risk for in your whole life, aside from pregnancy, you are at higher risk for during pregnancy. Anything from intimate partner violence, to homicide, to general health conditions, to dying, to severe medical conditions, to needing to be in the ICU, you name it, your risk in pregnancy is higher than outside of pregnancy. It's not health neutral to be pregnant. Women who were previously denied an abortion report more life-threatening complications during that pregnancy, and they go on to report more chronic health conditions overall. In fact, in one of these studies, there were 2 people who were denied a termination early in their pregnancy who went on to lose their life related to the pregnancy, and none of the people who were in the seeking abortion and accessed that termination category died from the abortion itself. We know that termination is safer as a whole than pregnancy when it is legal. So now I want to move on to answering a few questions that I pulled from the community tab. If Roe is overturned, would that also mean Planned Parenthood versus Casey would also be thrown out or made effectively irrelevant? Yes, and the draft opinion specifically states that their opinion would also overturn Planned Parenthood versus Casey on the premise that that was basically ruled to be constitutional based on Roe v. Wade, so it erases that as well. I live in one of the purple states on the chart, so they're talking about a map that lines out what abortion access would look like when this is implemented, and they want to know what can states like mine and the people in those states where abortion rights will be protected do to make it as easy as possible for someone to travel here and have access. Some states are already working on specific legislation that can put into place protections for people to come to their state and have a termination. This is a little bit problematic though, because once you get back to your own state, you could still be charged with whatever it is that they've decided is the penalty if it is found out that you purposefully ended your pregnancy. Donating to local organizations that support access to termination is something that you can do financially, but the short answer here is that I don't know. We can make a difference probably for some people, but this will end up with people who die and have worse health outcomes because they were denied access to termination when they wanted it. And we've seen that in the past. We've seen that in places that have made abortion illegal. So places like Ireland and places like Poland. The one in Poland was just this year. Earlier this year, they had a very publicized case where there was a death of a 27-year-old who was denied an abortion and died as a result of that. These are the things that happen. We've seen this. I talked about it in my other video. We know what happens when widespread bans on abortion are put into place. People die. And that is what will happen now as well. There's already been some cases in Texas where they have suspected that delays in care resulted in morbidity, which is massive harm, and or mortality for the person who had originally sought a termination and was denied. This is not a matter of if that will happen. We know that this will happen. It's just a matter of when and what the response will be. Will we see enough people in the US caring to publicize that and change the rules? I don't know. The next question is from Miss Patches. How will this impact things like IVF IUI, treatment for ectopic, and situations where the pregnant person is mentally unstable, where a pregnancy poses a serious risk to their health? So I think it's important to first state that pregnancy always poses a serious risk to your health as compared to not being pregnant. So that is existent in every single person who is pregnant. Now, do most pregnancies turn out okay? Yes. But is it true that you are safer if you're not pregnant? Absolutely. So when we are talking about things like ectopic pregnancy, this is a little bit of a gray zone. I've seen some really concerning language in laws, but I can't imagine that it would actually be illegal to treat an ectopic. I don't feel like anybody would actually support that. But you know what? 2 years ago, I probably would have said, there's no way they'll overturn Roe v. Wade. So who knows? I don't know. At the moment, treating ectopics should stay legal, I would think, in every place, hopefully. But again, I would not put anything past these people at this point. As far as IVF, IUI, so reproductive health care from a standpoint of infertility goes, absolutely 100%, these procedures, this medical care is at risk. If you start defining conception as the point of personhood, then what kind of ethical issues come into play if you have, 10 persons, 10 embryos frozen, and you don't want to implant all of them? Obviously this is concerning. What do you do with them? How do you get rid of them? Is it legal to get rid of them? They're 6 or 8 celled circles at that point. So what happens? I don't know. I can't answer that. I would say you should be very worried about your right to access care for infertility with this happening. Sanvi says, I've been hearing that it's possible SCOTUS could come after birth control, interracial marriage, same-sex marriage, etc. So these concerns are rooted in the concerning language that I was discussing earlier that Alito has put into this draft opinion. So they specifically talk about the fact that constitutional rights to privacy are not afforded explicitly in the Constitution, and things like interracial marriage and gay marriage are also rooted in this right to privacy portion. So the fact that it's being removed for termination access is really concerning. Now, they have said specifically in the draft opinion that they won't come after things like gay marriage and interracial marriage, but they also said that about overturning Roe v. Wade. So I don't know that we should trust them at all, that those things would not be at risk. From a contraception standpoint, absolutely 100%. It's already hard for a lot of people to access contraception. That will only get harder. I can guarantee you we will start seeing trickle-down effects of access to contraception as the next thing. The next question is from Karen. I live in Ohio and a DNC was medically necessary as my body would not pass the fetus at 12 weeks. Would this allow for medically necessary abortions or would it be none at all? This likely will not affect access to DNC and things like that in situations where there is no fetal heartbeat, but absolutely you could see a situation where somebody is 10 weeks, they are hemorrhaging, the fetus still has a heartbeat, and what can you do? At what point does this become a life-threatening situation? So we talked about this a little bit in the Texas law video, but medical emergency is such a gray zone. People who are pregnant are generally young and healthy, and they go from pretty much fine to trying to die on you very quickly because they compensate really well for lots of blood loss, even bleeding out into the abdomen. I've seen people with 2 liters of blood in their belly from a ruptured ectopic pregnancy who were talking to me and saying, I just have a little pain. It might be, food poisoning or something. These people go from that to coding quickly. So the fact that you're putting into place legal statutes that criminalize people who provide abortion, potentially with felony charges or worse, and then you are saying, well, you can do it if there's a medical emergency, it's going to delay care. So the time where that becomes a medical emergency, where that becomes okay, is gray. It's not black and white. And I know that everybody would like it to be, but I can tell you for certain it is absolutely not. And this will cause delays in care. And this is exactly what's happened in those cases that I was telling you about earlier in Poland and Ireland. That's how people die. The next question is from Sarah, who says, what about criminalizing miscarriages and the right to safe and pregnancy assessments of things like thyme oil, where there'll be a longer list of restricted foods in pregnancy? So these are kind of 2 separate questions. There definitely exists a concern for criminalizing miscarriage. So there's a couple of different ways that this could play out. One is that it's functionally impossible for me as a physician to tell if somebody has come in with a spontaneous abortion, which is the medical terminology for miscarriage, versus if someone has taken an abortion pill at home like mifepristone and come in because they're miscarrying and bleeding heavily. I can't tell which of these people is which based on an exam. That's impossible. When procedures come into it, it's a little bit different, but for early terminations versus miscarriages, they're functionally the same, and I can't test for that. You could absolutely see a situation where somebody has a spontaneous abortion, miscarriage, and then ends up being charged because somebody thinks they induced an abortion. We already saw a woman in Texas apprehended by the police for an abortion, and then it turned out she didn't even have one, she had a miscarriage. This is real. It will happen. It's already happening. And then the flip side of that is that there is absolutely a potential to weaponize pregnancy complications or outcomes against the person who is or was pregnant. So this isn't just things like using tobacco or using substances, which you should also be concerned that that will become a punishable crime as well in pregnancy. But there are situations, for example, if a pregnant person is driving a car and they end up breaking the law and causing an accident. So they're speeding down the highway 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. They have an accident and it causes them to have a miscarriage. Well, I could absolutely foresee being charged with manslaughter in that situation. You broke the law, you endangered the pregnancy, you caused the accident, you're at fault. That is a natural and logical next step when we start allowing for criminalization here. Next question is Maliko. One question, to what extent are abortions banned in the red marked states? I know the Texas heartbeat bill, but what if you figure out later that the fetus has anencephaly? Most of the red states who have trigger laws, which means they already have a law in the book, just in case Roe v. Wade ever gets overturned, that immediately bans abortion, do not make exceptions for fetal anomalies. So if you have a fetus and at 20 weeks find out you have anencephaly, you don't get the choice of carrying until you deliver or inducing and delivering before viability, even though those are both horrible choices, because in all likelihood at 20 weeks this was a very wanted pregnancy. You don't have that choice anymore. You must continue the pregnancy, which increases the risk to you, which is emotionally damaging to many people, and should really just be an option. Like, I don't think there's a right answer of how to handle the fact that you are carrying a terminally ill fetus. That is a very individual thing. But yes, almost every state that will completely ban abortion will absolutely not have an exception for fetal anomalies. I'm really afraid that pregnant people will die. If I already read that even abortions could be banned when the mother's life is in danger, or that politicians want to restrict it, I'm already feeling sorry for the future orphans. Just like we were talking about earlier, we know that this will happen based on what happened in Poland, what happened in Ireland, what's already started being seen in Texas. We know that that's what will happen. So you have every reason to be afraid of that, because it is a very realistic outcome of making it impossible to access termination for people who are pregnant. So the next one I pulled is, for everyone feeling helpless, just know that Roe being overturned only means the decision gets turned back to the states. You still have a voice and can influence your state and local governments. While that is true, you still have a voice and you can influence your state and local governments. Voting hard enough is not the problem, okay? The The people who are encouraging this to be overturned have not been the majority vote in the United States in recent history. Okay, they also are not currently the administrators in charge. So a lot of people who live in states where abortion will be banned based on a trigger law or have a near total ban or a pre-Roe law will go back into effect, the majority of them don't have a voice, because I vote in Texas and I certainly didn't vote for the people who will make abortion immediately illegal in Texas. So yes, we need to vote for people who will protect this, but I don't think that the fact that you can still vote and voice your opinion makes up for the fact that people are still going to die as a result of this. And anybody who says that that won't happen just doesn't understand this topic well enough. So I hope that you at least can take home from this video how incredibly dangerous it is to put these overarching restrictions on access to termination. I just want to end by saying that how somebody feels about abortion itself should really not have much to do with this conversation. How you feel about abortion and whether you would have one is really irrelevant to this discussion, because we can't risk other people's lives and health and even mental health and happiness because of something that we believe is morally or religiously correct, especially when it is very clear that many of these things fall into a gray area. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all of these discussions about them, right? Most people I see getting very heated in these discussions are calling people murderers and all of this stuff, but you can't actually think that, or there wouldn't be all of these discussions. Like, if you approach this with the idea that everybody who disagrees with you is just a evil murderer, which I get called in my comments all the time, then you are not actually furthering this topic. I've said this in another video, but I grew up in a very conservative town. I grew up in a very Southern Baptist, non-denominational when I got a little older, but very anti-abortion community. And I don't even think that I was given the space to think about how I felt about abortion or to learn about it, because I was so viscerally ingrained in this idea that it was just people murdering babies that I couldn't even see the other side of it. And getting into this field has allowed me to see how incredibly life-altering and dangerous pregnancy can be for some people, and also how gray the definition of life beginning is. This is not a political issue. This is not even a medical issue when life begins. It's a philosophical issue, and we don't get to make laws based on philosophical beliefs that we hold that the rest of the people that we're making the law for might not agree with. So it's concerning from that standpoint, but also I would just really encourage you to try to take a breath and listen. For me, this entire discussion comes down to bodily autonomy. A fetus can have rights. I don't have a problem with that. You can believe life begins anytime that you would like. I don't think that those things matter in this discussion. What matters is that you cannot give a right to a fetus that no other human has, which is the right to use someone else's body without express and ongoing consent. I can't make you give me an organ. You can't even make me give a blood donation to save my own kid's life if I refuse to do that, because that's not ethical. Even if my kid dies because I refuse to do it. You can't make people use their body to keep someone else alive. This is not ethical, and it's a breach of bodily integrity and autonomy. And what I feel, or what you feel, or what anyone feels about abortion on a moral level doesn't matter, because you have to look at it from the morality of forcing someone to give their body to a fetus that they don't want to. And that is an unethical position. And I hope that you learned something today. I will link the Texas abortion ban video right over here. If you are new and you'd like to subscribe, we would love to have you. I talk about all things periods, pregnancy, sex ed, abortion, and everything in between. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. I'll see you next Monday.